Peace and love, everyone. It's Takesha of Afro Canna Holistic, and you are watching another session of Black Women Who Blaze. And I have such a special guest with me today. Dr. Olga Obie is an endocannabinoligist. She is a physician, and she's going to dive into all things cannabis for your health. And so I appreciate you coming on the platform. I'm excited to hear about all the things you're going to share, your journey, what brought you to the industry specifically, and how people can reach out and get some help they need it. And so, yes, please introduce yourself to the platform.
Well, thank you so much, Takesha, for having me. And hello, everyone. I am Dr. Olga. That's Droga, like the Spanish word for drug or droga. I am a practicing endocannabinoid medicine specialist. I am also a studying and practicing cannabinologist, which means I am a scientist that studies the plant by itself, separate from its ingestion, to understand it as a being. I'm also a board certified emergency physician. I went to school in the United States at the University of Texas Medical Branch. Hey, UTMB. Graduated in 2009. And so today I practice a hybridized form of medicine. For those of you who don't understand what hybridized means, that means I take what I learned from the United States Medical School, what I learned as a curious herbalist, which is a studier of all plants and herbs and how they can help us. And as an endocannabinoid medicine specialist, I combine all those together to help the individual who seeks my assistance get to their highest purpose in health. And so that's what I like to call, or I'm coining, universal medicine. I do not discriminate. I do everything in my power to help the individual realize their highest level of health.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? That's so, I can see why Amy, she saw the connection, because when I created, Afro Canna Holistic, it was to that, alignment, that purpose as well, where it's the individual, but looking at the whole person and all the things that encompass what, the state of health they're in, and how to get them to a better state of health, but not just focused on that specific condition, but what led up to it, all the other things with mindset, trauma, all of that is encompassed in, Afro-Canna Holistic. So I'm so excited that you're here. And, and also herbs, when we know cannabis is an herb as well. And so I just felt like it fit right in with the, herbalist or herbalism world. But because of the way that it was criminalized, and it's the way it's treated, they just speak about it, separately, as well. But, I love that you can get into the herbs that also help, you know, and can kind of be combined and complementary to cannabis. So let's get started. And so, what state do you reside in?
I'm in Texas
Okay,
for now.
right. Okay. So, or you born and raised? You said you went to school in Texas. Did you come to Texas for school, or did you grow up there?
Yeah, so I'm a first generation Nigerian. What that means is that my parents are immigrants. They immigrated to New Mexico first and then settled in Texas. So I was born in Houston, Texas. I went to all of my preliminary schooling up until high school in Houston. I went to the University of Houston, go Cougs, and graduated with a degree in biochemical and biophysical sciences and a minor in chemistry. And then I went on to go to medical school as an obedient daughter at UTMB, which is in Galveston, Texas, about an hour and 20 minutes outside of where I grew up. But I'm born and raised, grew up in Texas, loved Texas, Texas girl. And so that's where I'm currently practicing as well. I practice both in right outside of Houston, in Eastern Texas. I also practice in El Paso, Texas, primarily. And then I also am planning to start working with the Corpus Christi Health System. So I'm just kind of a traveling emergency physician As a telehealth, I mean, as a endocannabinoid medicine specialist and an herbalist, I do teach practitioners who are interested in learning how to hybridize their practice. I also see patients via telehealth in most every state to help them better navigate endocannabinoid medicine, and in the future to better navigate herbal medicine. But for right now, telehealth for endocannabinoid medicine, emergency care and acute care is in Texas and also California.
Oh, wow, wow, busy, busy, busy woman. Yeah, but you hear that she does do telehealth, so you can reach out to her, and she will provide the services that she's able to offer via, virtually. So it doesn't matter what state you live in. I love that. So you're very accessible, and
Try to be.
right, and and that's what we need. And so you said Texas, so I have to ask, do you know or listen to Toby Nwigwe?
Of course. What?
That's right, that's right.
We are so proud of you, Toby.
Yes,
Toby, we're so
yes.
proud of you,
I
you and
could
your
imagine.
family.
I can imagine. So I love it. I love Twisted Sundays and all the things. So
Mhm.
but Texas is huge. I'm hearing a lot of great things about Texas now. So are you a medicinal patient?
I am. So let me make sure that I explain what that means. Since I reside in Texas, I do not qualify for the Texas medical marijuana program under its strict guidelines. But I am a patient that utilizes hemp, which is cannabis. Hemp and marijuana are not chemically very different. And so I use hemp because it is legal according to the US Farm Bill. And I mostly stick with the CB cannabinoids. Those are like CBD, CBG, CBN, CBDA, CBDV. I do imbibe THCA and THCV, never when I have to work. And I stick with the law to make sure that the percentages are allowed. Um, I do like to create my own formulations because I know what works for me. And so I make my own formulations for myself. I don't buy them from any particular place. And use that just from time to time when I feel like I need it. Specifically because I work so much and have dealt with some losses in my life, I've found a lot of relief with things like anxiety, insomnia, fear, being alone, which I know a lot of women might experience, fertility enhancement, libido enhancement, and for things like pain and nausea, which you can sometimes, those of you that have anxiety or PTSD like symptoms, you can probably relate to what I'm saying. But yes, I do use hemp.
Yes, yes, I agree. That is my diagnosis. PTSD was the first. And so that's how I was able to get my medicinal card. But yes, very helpful. All the cannabinoids, like you said, there's a variety of them, and you can find products on the market, but you definitely have to source them from a trusted place. You want safe, lab tested, of course. But yeah, making your own herbal formulations, that's, I'm a fan of that. I'm a big fan of it, because that's exactly what I do, a DIY. That way I can control pretty much the
Mhm.
dosage and the amount, like the percentage of potency and stuff like that. So I agree. Okay, so obviously you just mentioned that Texas still is not recreationally legal, but they do have a medicinal program. And so, what qualifies you for the medicinal program in Texas?
There are 8 major categories. Make sure I'm counting them all right. Autism, seizure disorder, which is one of the first two characterizing qualifying conditions. So seizure disorder encompasses epilepsy as well as one-off seizures. Um, like I said, autism, which is the spectrum all the way from Asperger's to debilitating autism. Cancer, any diagnosis, any stage. PTSD, which is a new qualifying condition. Multiple sclerosis, separate from ALS, two separate categories. Spasticity, which is literally just the word spasticity has to be on your diagnostic list. So anything that says the word spastic, spasticity, spasm qualifies you, as well as neurodegenerative disorder, which is a very broad category that includes right now some over 1 to 200 subcategories. So anything from peripheral neuropathy, if you have diabetes, you qualify, all the way up to Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome, which is a very severe neurodegenerative disorder. And so those are the categories under which you can qualify currently.
Wow, wow. And this is great to know because even the language sometimes, just as a regular, consumer or patient, and you're going on trying to do the research yourself, you may see some of these listed, but you wouldn't really know in depth, like you said, that those other conditions qualify, unless you're able to speak to a doctor that actually knows the law and knows what it is. So this is a gift, an opportunity to chat with you. And so you did go into a little bit about how cannabis helps you specifically, but what are some of the conditions that it can help with?
Well, the beautiful thing about cannabis is what I teach my clients. Cannabis has a phytocannabinoid system. Phyto meaning plants, cannabinoid meaning cannabis or cannabis constituents. And human beings have an endocannabinoid system. Endo meaning interior, cannabinoid meaning cannabis, meaning that it's cannabis-like. What that means is that the two systems are kind of like your left and right hand. They
Mm,
just kind of superimpose on each other almost perfectly in order to allow your system to be balanced. And the endocannabinoid system, which is what we have, balances everything. It's literally like the principal of a school or the conductor of a symphony. You can have all of these parts. You have the woodwind, you have the strings, you have the percussion, you have the brass, and they can all play their music. But when the conductor comes in and tells them when to crescendo, when to decrescendo, when the woodwinds come in, when the strings come in, now you've got music. And it does that perfectly all throughout your life without ever failing if it is supported. What does that mean? If the endocannabinoid system is not supported or deficient, then you start to have dis-ease symptoms. Typically, you start to see out of control nausea, pain, chronic pain, especially fatigue, um, anxiety or depression, suicidal thoughts that won't go away, gastrointestinal symptoms like leaky gut syndrome, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, chronic diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome. You also start to get migraines, which is a very specific type of headache. You get neuropathic disease, things like Alzheimer's disease or dementia in general, forgetfulness, even if you don't have dementia, irritability or mood changes, things like PTSD, things, inability to forget traumas. These are what happens when the endocannabinoid system is assaulted or deficient or dysfunctional. I mentioned a lot of diagnoses on there that many of us suffer with. Other things like endocrine diseases like diabetes type 1 and 2, hypertension, high cholesterol, PCOS, fibroids, infertility, decreased libido, um, hypothyroidism, cancer, every category. When the endocannabinoid system is not functional or not supported or deficient, then you start to develop these diseases. Cannabis, the phytocannabinoid, or comes from the plant, fits right on top of what might be missing from your own system. So that's why things like THC, yes, THC, specifically Delta 9 or Delta 8 or Delta 10, which are the cousins of Delta 9, CBD, a very big cannabinoid, terpenes, things like linalool, which give lavender its smell, or things like myrcene, which give cloves its smell, will also fit perfectly in our endocannabinoid system to now make it not deficient, to give it support, to make sure it's whole so that it can do its thing. Once it's whole, you don't need to go to the cardiovascular system. You don't need to go to the gastrointestinal system. You don't need to go to your psychological system. It will go there. because it knows what to do better than we do. And so all of those symptoms like anxiety, problems focusing, inability to conceive, problems with postpartum depression, problems with libido, problems with uncontrollable blood sugar. We are now studying the plant, understanding that when it is provided to the human being, the human being's endocannabinoid system now can function again and relieve. This is why we know cannabis should be given depending on the cannabinoid while a patient is receiving chemo or once a patient is diagnosed with cancer. It is most likely their endocannabinoid system that needs support so that it can start things like tumor apoptosis, which means programmed cell death, so that those cancer cells go back to normal or die.
Right.
And so that is just in a nutshell. Basically, cannabis, it's not a cure-all, but basically cannabis supports our endocannabinoid system, which allows our system to now fix what's broken.
Right, right. And I just love how you put that because like you said, it is not a cure-all. That's not what you're explaining, but it is a supplement to what is deficient. Just like if you are deficient in something else and a doctor prescribes you, something to supplement you until you are now whole again and that system is working properly. But along with cannabis, are there some other ways that you can support your endocannabinoid system to bring it back into balance? And then, because it's like, okay, I have the cannabis, and I see this a lot where I have the cannabis and I'm taking it, but I really haven't removed behaviors or other toxins or things like that that contributed to the deficiency or the dysfunction.
Yeah, so typically I go through 6 pillars of health, or 6 things that are epigenetics are affected by which our epigenetics are affected by. Epigenetics are the external things that affect your DNA and how your DNA recreates you every day. So every day we're being recreated. Cells are breaking down and building back up. Primarily when we sleep is when that process is the most efficient. During that time, you lose some skin cells, you lose some heart cells, you lose some gastrointestinal cells, and you gain some new cells. Epigenetics, which are things like nutrition or food, environment like smog, stress, both emotional, work, and physical stress, water and hydration status, emotional connections, extremely important, and movement, which is movement of air, bowel movements, and movement of the physical body in the form of activity or exercise. These pillars are important to address, and when you're taking cannabis for your health and healing, but they're also things that affect us whether we like it or not, and they affect whether or not our DNA is renewing us the correct way or deficient and renewing us incorrectly. And so a lot of what I teach clients is there's cannabis and then there are cannabinoid activities, therapies, and behaviors that are important to incorporate, really are not an option, but definitely affect the human endocannabinoid system in similar ways and as cannabis does.
Wow, wow. I mean, I just heard that, what I'm hearing is when you say epigenetics and, our DNA, we're recreating ourselves every day. It's just, really, I got a spark that, like you said, if you're not doing these things, now when you're recreating yourself, you are creating a deficient cell. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's gonna be created regardless, but it'll be deficient of something, and now it cannot do its job properly. And so
Absolutely.
you do
And
have
with
a
you saying the word recreating, I want to bring people's attention to this is my duty as an herbalist to destigmatize the word recreational because it actually should be pronounced recreational.
yeah,
Recreational use of adaptogens and entheogens or psychedelics or herbs is ancient. It is a well-known practice of self-taught medicine.
Yeah.
street medicine,
Yeah.
community medicine, which means not conventional, not unstructured. It is structured, but unstructured medicine. Recreational medicine or recreational use must be supported because the individual has to build their intuition. Intuition is the one thing that leads us to on the right path of healing for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when you say the way that you said the word recreation and how we're talking about recreate, it brings to mind the opportunity to help re-educate. Recreational use must be supported. If it is not, and I don't get into rights and politics, I get
Right.
into self-healing. If it is not, then you yourself are allowing yourself to not take charge of your healing, which will never go well or perfectly without you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That, and it's so important. And I love how you redefined or really just, broke the word down to where as you can see the root word in it is
Mhm,
create. And
mhm,
so
mhm,
what and it's just coming to the plant intentionally. What is the intention with this with your what you're consuming and how and why you're consuming it. And nobody's, hey, like you said, we're not we're not saying not to have a good time. You can't help but to, depending on the cannabinoid, but at the same time, know that there is a purpose,
mhm.
happening here, and honor it. That's what we're saying, and just honor it. And so, what was the catalyst for your involvement into the cannabis industry?
Oh, wow. So, it started out with, as a young child, I always kind of was, I don't know if I was different or I just saw things different. I still do through my eyes. Like, for example, Takesha, the way I see you, I see your face and I've taught myself how to see your face, see your hair silhouette. But as a child, I saw things geometrically. So people's faces look like geometric shapes.
Wow.
And I'm not an artist, but if I had a sketch artist, I could sketch out what you actually look like through my eyes. And I learned from a young age that other people don't see people pixelated the way that I do. There's nothing wrong with my eyesight. I've had my eyes checked. I do wear glasses, but from a young age, it was always kind of interesting to me because I could see other young children, they look normal. As I got older people, starting around age 10, 12, start to look a little different. And when you're happy, you start to look more like yourself, more like your pixels, like your structures come together. Like that's how I can tell that you are just wow, because everything is just kind of lining up. Um, and so, I started to notice how I could tell that people were not themselves. And the funny thing is, being happy is all it really takes to kind of start to align it. It doesn't hold very long if your happiness doesn't last very long, but it does help you get back to you. And so I was lucky enough to grow up with a very eclectic dad. My dad is a physician, started out as a chemist himself, and just kind of like Willy Wonka, he's a very colorful person. He's got a lot of ideas and he just loves to talk when he thinks it's ready. But he also loves plants. He loves natural medicine. He loves quirky medicine. He loves alchemy. So I grew up with him and with a very structured mom, totally opposite. And so I learned how to express myself in the right setting, if you will. As I started growing up, my parents are Nigerian. I'm the first born daughter of both of my parents. And so I have a different responsibility than the rest of my siblings, and that is to exemplify obedience. Luckily, I love being obedient. Do whatever my parents say. It doesn't matter. If they tell me to jump off a bridge, I'm doing it. Well, not now, not doing it now, but
Right.
then I was. And so I went to college and my dad chose my major, which I ended up loving. It's hard, but I liked it. And then when it was time for college to finish, I wanted to be an interior designer. I definitely didn't want to go to medical school. Mm-mm. But my dad was like, you're going to do it. I've already applied for your test. You're going to go take it. I took my MCAT. And then he helped me apply to all the schools. I applied. He helped me schedule my interviews. I went to my interviews and just kind of with my dad as my manager, and got into school, very excited about that. And when I went to school, man, I had so much fun. I mean, you get to learn all this stuff. You get tons of books you can read to your heart's content. And that's what I did. By the time it was time for school to finish, I didn't know what, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm like, oh, so we have to pick a practice? We can't do all of them? I
Mm.
didn't know. That was weird. So I chose emergency medicine because it's fast and fun. But as soon as I started in emergency medicine, I quickly realized, like, man, all these people look, their pixels are off.
Mm.
Everybody, children, everyone. Um, but we learned what to do in school. Why aren't we doing that? What if somebody's thyroid is off? Why don't we go back to the book? Why are we giving them pills? We know that's not going to work. We know this. I'm not joking.
Right.
We know how to fix the thyroid dysfunction. Why aren't we doing that? And then I also didn't understand, I kind of had an idea like, if anything is broken in the body, there's something that's supposed to keep it all together. That's the same, for everything. A refrigerator has structure. That structure, it has a central monitoring system.
Mhm.
The body has to have that. And I knew it did, we just never learned it. So then I started traveling and kind of picking up herbal remedies here and there to help with what I was going through. And finally went to Peru for the first time. That was my first year summer of medical school. And man, Peruvians they're on some other stuff, let me tell you. So I went there and I learned about ayahuasca, did not use it at that time. I learned Spanish, came back. The next year I went back by myself and I was hell-bent on finding ayahuasca.
Mhm.
And when I found it, kind of scared, didn't use it, left, went back the year after I graduated and used ayahuasca for the first time.
Wow.
The experience was medium. I definitely experienced psychedelic experience, but not nearly what I experienced in other people. The other people that were there were really healing themselves.
Mm.
And even if they weren't, they really believed it. They were not discombobulated. Their pixels were together, even though they had disease. They were much more together than the people that I was treating in emergency medicine. So when I came back during that time, that 3-4 year span, I was learning about all the other herbs and realized how quickly I could incorporate them and give people recommendations, and people actually that were interested really liked it. So by the time I graduated residency, I was already incorporating herbs into my emergency medicine practice here and there, kind of timidly. And I was really talking about psychedelics,
Mm.
really talking about iboga, San Pedro, ayahuasca especially, and then psilocybin. Never touched cannabis,
Wow.
never, not once. You couldn't pay me to do it. It was too illegal.
Right.
I
Right.
was not going to lose my license. I thought it was a bad plant. Like, that must be the plant that God put in the Garden of Eden. That must be it right there. Supposed to stay away from that. Nope, not doing it.
Right.
So it wasn't actually until like 6 years ago or 7 years ago, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, introduced me to another friend who wanted me to invest in a company that was a budding marijuana lifestyle company out of Oakland, California. So I met with that group. I did invest, and I was also asked to come on as a medical advisor to give herbal advice on how to develop their products. So I moved out to Oakland. When I did that, my intention was to tell them what else to use besides cannabis. Because I'm like, cannabis we can't use that. It's a terrible plant. I get out there and I did all my research, but it wasn't until I used cannabis for the second time in my life. First time it was, I smoked when I was in college and I didn't really care for it, but I used an edible and I'm telling you, I took too much. Let me tell you, don't do it this way. Well, maybe you should do it this way. I took so much that I was so giggly. I mean, these are strangers. I didn't know these people. I was so giggly. I had got back to my hotel after Lord knows what I said, and I ordered all the junk food. I wasn't really eating junk food by then. I ordered all the whole pizza.
Wow.
I ordered 6 donuts. I think I had like Arnold caramel tea or something like that. And that food was so good. But most importantly, I felt free. I felt more free than I had ever, and I was a rebel by then by many standards, but I
Yeah.
felt free. I felt like a woman. I felt like invincible, and not like I could jump off of anything, more like I could be with myself and not have anxiety. I could be with myself and enjoy food. I could be with myself and feel myself, and so I felt really very good. I slept a lot. The next day I woke up and I had it was like I slept for 1,000 years. And when I looked through my eyes, this time it was like I could see clearer what I was seeing, what I had been seeing all those years. I had been seeing people's discomfort,
Mm,
dis-ease, lostness.
mm,
I was seeing them, what I was seeing was them. And it was kind of like a psilocybin experience for me. But after that, I understood what was going on with this plant. I understood why so many don't want us to use it.
right.
And then my research, which I knew how to do on herbals before that, my research of cannabis was exploded. Ever since then, I've been like, it's easy for me to find information on it. The other thing that I realized is that we purposely were not taught about that or the pineal gland's function in medical school.
Yeah.
Those two things. I looked through all my books. There's not one single mention of the endocannabinoid system. Forget cannabis.
Right.
We did talk about cannabis as a drug of abuse. We never talked about the endocannabinoid system. It is not in any of my books, and those are some very good books. And we never talked about the pineal gland's function, even though we dissected it from our cadaver. And I thought that was very, very interesting. Pineal gland is interesting if anyone is curious, because this is the center where we secrete our own entheogens, which is a spiritual molecule. One of
Yeah.
them is DMT.
Yes.
The other
Yeah.
one is melatonin.
Yes.
So we secrete that from this gland. Whether yours is calcified or not, it can be decalcified. It wants to be decalcified. And
Yes.
once turned on, usually easily by entheogens, it is very difficult to turn it off. Some would say impossible, lest you resect it out of your brain.
Mm, mm, mm.
Um, and so after I discovered that, as you can see, you can't get me to shut up about it. I recognized the way I was going to help people who want help to reconnect their molecules, to make sure that they stay connected and they breathe together and they live together and they go to each other first before they go externally, so that they can get to their highest purpose in healing and
Mm.
in health.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
Amazing. Just an amazing journey, really, to how you kind of navigated. And you went to what they, like you say, would consider psychedelics first, before most people wind up with cannabis, and then they'll, move to, some type of psychedelic to, now maybe have a different, altered state of consciousness, they say, so it's amazing how you got, you were already in the medical field, and you found your way to cannabis, and you started doing your research, after herbalism, and after, making those trips to Peru, and then really diving into, psychedelics, because that's my next, journey, really, is moving into that space, because for the very reason that you just spoke of, the pineal gland, and the fact that we emit our own DMT, you know, um, and like you said, melatonin and all of those things. Just I'm fascinated, and I don't know. I just didn't wind up in medicine, maybe because I was, like you say, you were a rebel for a long time, but I probably was a rebel from birth at this point. Get this life, get the system. My dad, he was heavy, in the 5% nation. So I grew up with the black man is God and all of that type of stuff. And so it was really, I knew eventually I'd find my way into, health and healing, specifically, and self-healing. So
That's why you look like that. I wish you guys could see what she looks like. She's one of the most unique structures I've seen in a very long time.
really,
That's why.
wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I really love how you are able to tie it all together when it comes to, like you said, the whole person. We're not just speaking about, conditions that cannabis can help with, but just your whole being, you know,
Yeah.
physical and what they would consider metaphysical, all the parts of you, this plant can help with, and many other herbs and plants as well. So I wanted to ask, though, specifically for Black women, what is the most common condition that you see us seeking cannabis for?
The Black American woman, which is what I am, uh, by far, she feels the weight of of the universe is really calling to her to please rise up. And by far, anxiety, or what we call anxiety, by far, hands down, hands down. And then all of the anxiety related symptoms like insomnia, pain, a lot of chest pain or heart centered pain, fertility or decreased sexual desire, which is a sign of pathology if a woman is experiencing that, just like if a man is experiencing that, because that's the center of our creativity. But number one is anxiety or anxious like symptoms. So anything from mild anxiety, like not being able to focus, all the way up to panic and PTSD.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Wow. And I agree. I mean, yeah, we definitely carry, you know, a
Mhm.
load,
Yeah.
heavy loads. And we do, especially in this part of the world,
Mhm.
it's just
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
many on a day to day, you
Mhm.
know, that I have to experience, you have to experience. It's, I had likened it to, a deer, when they know that they can sense a coyote is near, and they have that heightened sense
Because
of like you said, anxiety, and we have to always be on alert.
yeah,
So cannabis is definitely helpful in
yeah.
helping us get to a relaxed state so we can just be who we are, and we don't have to be you know anything outside of ourselves all the time. Like, that cortisol is always raised for us, so we need the time to not have to. And when we, like you said, when we consume, that's our time, that's our self-care,
Yep.
that's us taking care of
Yes.
ourselves. So I was going to say, why should it be an option for us specifically, but we just spoke about it. Why you should come to it, for the multiple reasons that you explained. We are dealing with those physical manifestations of what we're dealing with spiritually. It's just here. It shows up, and now we have cannabis to help us, and we have to definitely advocate for our own health, because that was another question. Access. You know, some of the barriers to access that have you seen um, a lot of barriers for us getting access, and is that like a form of health inequity, not being able to access it?
Well, I'm going to speak for, I'll say this. The barrier to access is an illusion. And bear with me, everyone. If you're having a hard time finding, sourcing product, contact me. The illusion is that cannabis is marijuana only. And so lack of education, in my opinion, is the barrier, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
We are allowed in all 50 states and US territories to have and grow hemp.
Mm,
It is our right. It is written into law, United States law. That includes Puerto Rico. But the illusion or the belief is that, well, it's not legal in my state, oftentimes referring to marijuana. You can get exactly the same things out of hemp. Exactly, not kidding. Same constituents. Understanding what is safe for you is an equity issue, in my opinion. That has to do with each state has a right to decide what it tells its citizens. But if you understand how to navigate that, if you understand that if somebody tells you you're not allowed to use it, but you really are, then you find out what the laws are, and then you find your product. So I would say, it could, or it initially attempted to be an equity issue. It is not anymore, it doesn't have to be. As long as you carry with you understanding that you can access hemp, and hemp is cannabis from the cannabis family, and it contains CBD, CBN, CBG, THC, THCA, THCV, terpenes of every flavor, alkaloids of every nature, exactly the same as the marijuana plant. Then now you know you can order online. As long as you know what are reputable companies, you can find your products. If you are one that is interested in utilizing cannabis, also understanding that if and when you start your cannabis journey, it must be done in conjunction with the whole or the cannabimimetics I was talking about. Cannabis should not be used with the intention of it being the only thing you're going to utilize to heal you on your endocannabinoid healing journey. And so that's the education I'm talking about. Hemp, if you're not in a marijuana recreational state, plus cannabimimetics, and you're back on track.
Awesome.